If you've ever uttered the words, "God, how could you?" this video is for you. One morning in the middle of Pakistan during unrest in the city, a little girl and her mom were baking dinner. There was a knock at the door, and the little girl, not knowing any better, opened the door to find terrorists standing in front of her. They requested some water, so she let them inside. The girl watched her mother be brutally murdered in a scene that is better left undescribed. The terrorists reached for her to make her the next victim, but just as they grabbed her wrist, she heard a click. She looked back to see her father. He had pulled a gun aimed right at the terrorist leader's head. Checkmate. She was saved by the protection of her father. But the terrorists didn't give up that easy. Their anger burned against the father, and the next day when the little girl was at school, they approached her kindly and cunningly. The enemy, knowing how much it would hurt the father and designing their ultimate destruction, convinced the little girl that she should be angry at her father for not creating a safer home for her. They told her that her father, not them, was ultimately responsible for her mother's death because her father had built the house and built the door. Of course, the reality was that if the door was not built, the girl would not have had any freedom to go in or out of the house, but she was so emotional that didn't even cross her mind. He convinced her that what she needed to do was join their terrorist organization and help them attack other families. After all, there was other negligent fathers who had built doors that needed to learn a lesson so that no little girl would ever experience what she did ever again. He was able to turn all of the pain that she was experiencing against them and misplace it towards her own father. As soon as the terrorists got the little girl out of the protection of the father's house and into the terrorist camp, they spent every day terrorizing her and making her forget her identity. She believed that this was just how it was everywhere, and so she didn't even try to escape. You'd think she would run back to the father's house, but instead, her anger burned towards him more with every lashing that she received from the terrorists. The father wept and wept every night he came to the gate, calling for his little girl. She could hear his voice at first, but then she'd just turn the music up so loud that she would drown it out. Freedom, love, and healing were on the other side of the gate. She could easily walk to it, open the door, but the lies that she believed prevented her from doing it. The lies kept her locked in her own death chamber. God created free will for the same reason the Father created a door. It was made for our freedom. His purpose in making it was so that love could flourish. There can't be real loving relationships without the ability to freely choose to love. And a world of robotics, like C.S. Lewis says, would hardly be worth creating at all, and definitely not capable of facilitating a world with real love. Now, unfortunately, the Bible says that people began to violate the purpose of free will, just as the terrorists violated the purpose of the door. The door was there to provide freedom for the girl to go in and out, but by nature of its existence, it provided a way for intruders to come in. The father could have chosen not to create the door, but in doing that, he would have also limited the freedom of the girl. Our freedom was created so that love could exist, but we violated its purpose and used it to act selfishly. Those selfish acts cause pain to other people. They cause damage to the natural world and even a curse on nature itself. The evil and pain that we experience were because of a perversion and violation of God's purpose for freedom. Mankind joined God's enemy, the Prince of Darkness. But the terrorist of our souls, known as Satan, has been successfully convincing people for ages that the one to blame was God, their loving Father. He's even convinced them they should join him in his lawlessness and help in rebellion against the Father. If we truly knew the intentions of the soul terrorist that we are serving, we would be sick to our stomach. Just like with the little girl, healing, love, and protection are available to us right on the other side of the gate. But we have turned the music up so loud that we cannot hear the Father's desperate pleas for us. We've forgotten what it means to be human, how we're supposed to be treated, how we treat one another, what our inheritance is, how loved we are. And we can't figure out why we're anxious and depressed and tortured while we're still living inside the terrorist camp. My plea to you today is turn down the music, listen to your Father's voice. Are you sure that you know who you are rejecting? Analyze the lies that you're believing. Do they make sense? Are you blaming the right person, or are you running away from love into the arms of death, willfully staying locked inside its grip? The enemy has lied to you about the character of your Father. He, the enemy, is to blame for the pain in your life. Your identity is a beloved child of God. You have the power to take off the shackles, leave the enemy camp, open the gate to your Father's protection, and as the age-old statement goes, you have the ability to let the truth set you free. It doesn't make logical sense. The logical response to pain is to hate the thing that causes pain, namely evil. It's to distance ourselves from evil, not distance yourself from God, goodness, and love. The underlying fallacy is a belief that if you're experiencing pain, it must mean that God's okay with it, that he turned a blind eye to it or caused it. But the scriptures say the opposite. It says God is not apathetic towards us. Rather, his heart breaks with ours. That he never leaves us, but rather that he longs to gather us under his wings of protection and healing. The Bible says that God is the very personification of love, the perfection, fullness, and originator of love, the perfection of grace, the perfection of peace, the perfection of compassion. And God says of you that his heart delights in you, that he sustains you. In him we live and move and have our being, that his love and mercy towards you are infinite, that his love for you never fails. It doesn't make logical sense to say the being who is the author, originator, and perfection of love is unloving. Love doesn't cause evil or harm. It is selfishness that causes evil, and evil that causes pain. It's not consistent with his character to believe that he in any way delights in or is apathetic towards your suffering. And it doesn't make logical sense to push away love during times of pain. Small caveat, yes, I do believe God allows evil as a necessity of allowing freedom of will. And you can watch my other video to see how I think that all works together. But allowing is very different than causing and being at fault for. God is not to be blamed for pain. Evil is to be blamed for pain. Pain doesn't come from goodness. Pain comes from evil and lawlessness. I've never been hurt by somebody loving me. Love, by very definition, is putting somebody else's needs ahead of your own. If somebody who claims to love you hurts you, they weren't acting loving at the time of the hurt. They were acting out of maybe obsession or selfishness. Here's what does cause pain. Things like being abandoned. Abandonment is the loss of love. Betrayal by somebody that you trust is painful. Betrayal comes from a lack of love. We feel pain when somebody abuses, belittles, or is harsh with us. Abuse stems from a lack of love. If God is the personification of love, then abuse, abandonment, and loss can truly be said to be caused by a lack of God. Distancing yourself from God because you hate evil and pain is like throwing out your vegetables because you don't like that people are getting sick from obesity. It's the opposite of what you should be doing. Distancing yourself from McDonald's would be the proper response, but not distancing yourself from healthy food. The fact that you were attacked while you were in your father's house doesn't mean that your father attacked you. You were attacked by an intruder. And running from God because of pain and giving your allegiance to the ruler of this world is the equivalent of thinking you can escape from your attacker by running away from the house of your father into the house of the attacker and locking yourself in with him. It is blaming the truest lover for things that have come as a result of the lack of love. It doesn't even make moral sense. By turning your allegiance away from God in the face of pain, you are literally serving and perpetuating the thing you hate. You might say that you think following God leads to bad things, war, judgmentalism. You might say that you think self-rule is good. Everyone can decide for themselves what is right or wrong. After all, to each his own. But if you follow this through to its real conclusions, you're not going to like where it leads in practice. Self-rule leads to relativism. It leads to subjective morality. When you don't give your allegiance to God, but instead decide you're going to live by your own set of rules and standards, everything becomes subjective. There is now no longer any objective morality or truth by which to stake a claim. Which means you really can't get mad about anything. An even bigger issue is that when I'm the center of my moral system, by definition, my moral system is based on self and leads to choices based on selfishness. God's system is based on unconditional love. The entire climax of the biblical story is that even when we were in total rebellion against him, he took our punishment, bore our pain, and died in our place on the cross. He loved us self-sacrificially. He didn't do what was best for himself. He chose the thing that was the most selfless, loving thing that he could have done. And something in us knows selfless love is deserving of honor. The scriptures say it is only when we mimic this selfless love of Christ that we're able to find our life and experience the richness he created us to experience in community. It was only by sacrificial love that he could turn our hearts away from selfishness to be able to see the beauty of his ways. Lawlessness, self-determining morality, and subjective morality lead to evil because they, by definition, stem from selfishness, self-focus. The center of self-rule is selfishness. You are basing your morality on yourself, and the central decision-making factor is what you want, not what is best for others. Relativism isn't consistent with how you really feel. It might sound good to say to each his own, and everyone can decide for themselves what's right and wrong, good and evil, but it only sounds good when we are thinking about people who obey their conscience, which is really just God's standard written on our heart. When people disobey their conscience and cause pain to others, you'll begin to find yourself not so okay with it. You'll complain when somebody isn't fair to you, but fairness itself is an objective moral principle, a standard set at a higher level than the individual. It's of God whom you reject. In relativism, if I don't believe fairness is a moral standard I want to play by, I can just decide fairness isn't a moral standard that I value. And who are you to tell me to be fair and impose your morality on me? Who gets to decide being fair is a rule that we should live by? You might say that you're okay with this in theory, but I guarantee you will be upset if somebody doesn't respect you or isn't tolerant with you, but respect and tolerance in relativism can't be enforced because they only matter or apply to a person if they believe it should have value. In relativism, who is to say that one person's morality, that respect and tolerance are not important, is less valid than your opinion that they are? We begin to open a can of worms that can lead to every evil under the sun, and evil, as we discussed, leads to every kind of pain. And last, it doesn't make emotional sense. The biggest issue with blaming God for pain is that we are now clinging to a worldview that provides no hope, love, or power. Pushing away from God leads to pain and delayed healing. In order to get through the pain, we need a purpose bigger than ourselves to pull us through, and our Creator provides that purpose. We need to trust that we are loved, that we're never alone, that we're never abandoned. We need to trust His power will stay in control in order to have hope for a better future. Running from Him is running from our medicine. It is running from the arms of comfort that we desperately need. Now, it has to be true in order to bring comfort. I'm not in any way suggesting that we should just delude ourselves to make ourselves feel better. But this video is assuming that you believe He's real and reject Him on the grounds of pain. If you don't believe He's real at all for other reasons, see some of my other videos and see if they can help answer any of your questions. If you have been distancing yourself from God because you blame Him for the pain in your life, I beg you, reevaluate how you came to the conclusion that He was the one deserving of the blame. I encourage you, restore your relationship with the Father who loves you. Bask in the healing and comforting arms of the love that sourced all love. Click below to learn more about how to restore your relationship with God or begin one. I hope you guys have a blessed week.